Stanley is our guest speaker tonight. And as you all have maybe checked out our interview series before, one of the Words of Wisdom series that we did with Stanley like almost 2 months ago. So since then, whoever heard his story are just super inspirational and impactful. So we have the honor tonight to have Stanley to speak to us, and his topic will be having difficult conversations. So Stanley, you want to take it over? The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thanks again for giving me the opportunity, Angela. In fact, at some point, if you want, I could share my screen. It's just that I was thinking about this more as a conversation as opposed to a presentation. But if you would like me to share my screen, to share some slides, I could. But why don't we start this with a conversation? So why is this important to me? I'll begin with this. It's because everyone has to have conversations that we can say are difficult in life, right? And depending on your personality, depending on your upbringing, depending on your conflict management style, you can have different types of approaches to having difficult conversations. So let's just get a feel in the room for how people approach difficult conversations. So who on the call tonight loves to have difficult conversations? So just raise your hand. You just wake up in the morning and you
me.
Okay.
Me.
There's always one. So we've got all one. Are there more people who enjoy having difficult conversations?
I definitely
waste of time.
I love the challenge. I don't like
Waste
it.
of time.
Okay.
Not really going anywhere.
Okay. So some people, as you can tell, don't mind having difficult conversations. In fact, they thrive on that. They love having difficult conversations. My experience is that for most people, it's not something they look forward to. It's something that they avoid. And what if you could change the way you view difficult conversations? And what if you could have the tools to have difficult conversations? How positive of an impact would that have on your life? And so this is why this subject is fascinating to me, because most people I know would rather not have difficult conversations. And so they try to avoid them. And you know what usually happens when you avoid something that is unavoidable, it just gets worse. And so what I've learned over time is that there are ways to have difficult conversations that can actually make it easier to have and have better results. And those are the things I'd like to share with you guys. And as I said, let's make this more of a conversation rather than a presentation. And so let me begin with the question for those who don't like having difficult conversations. Why do you think you avoid having the difficult conversations in your life?
Are we talking difficult? I'm sorry if I'm just sort of a little bit off in what we're discussing. Are we talking difficult conversations as in the death of a loved one, or difficult conversations as in somebody that's being difficult, like an unnecessary conversation, maybe like you're doing dealing with a resistant client in counseling?
Right. That's a very good question, Jean-Pierre. Thank you for asking that question. So yeah, I realized that I should have clarified. Yes, it's true to talk about, it's difficult to talk about matters that are difficult, like the death of loved ones, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a conversation that can result in a conflict, a conversation either because of the topic or because of what's at stake, or because of the type of individual that you're going to interact with. You know in your mind and your head that this is a difficult conversation. So is that clear enough? Does that clarify?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much.
Right. No, thank you for asking that question. So what makes you hesitate to have those kind of conversations? So James? Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say Hope was first.
Okay, sure. Go ahead, Hope.
Basically, I definitely do try to avoid difficult conversations, but there's something in me that I will like have obsessive thoughts until I actually have that conversation. So I will push myself. Doesn't matter if I am stressed doing it, I will still do it. But I do believe that it has a huge there's a huge reason behind my upbringing and why I avoid conflict, because for me there was no good conflict. It was always bad conflict.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think we will find that Hope is not alone in that. And you said something here that I'd like to pick on, Hope. It's the fact that when we avoid conflict or difficult conversations, they don't go away. We just carry them in our minds.
Yeah.
And they seem to, there's this weight that keeps us from moving on to something else, because we know that ultimately we're going to have to face the challenge of the difficult conversation. So thank you for pointing that out. Go ahead, James.
So I was going to say that it would probably have a lot to do with, one, your self-confidence in that sense, being able to address that situation. And then also I would think that your comfortability, like being able to talk in on those topics too, could also be a thing too, because if you've never addressed certain situations, how are you supposed to know how to react, right? So those are determining factors, I think, that could lead to why someone wouldn't want to respond.
That's great. That's great. Thank you for your vulnerability. I think at the root of it, if I'm understanding you well, James, there is this uncertainty, this fear of where is this going to lead? Is it going to lead?
What's going to happen?
Yeah,
absolutely.
What's going to happen? Is it gonna lead to more pain? Am I going to be in a worse situation than I was before? So I think that's very valid. Also, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, Amina.
Yep, you're good.
Sure, go ahead, Amina.
Yeah, for me, kind of just to add on to what James said, for me, it's the unknown and being vulnerable and my emotions. I know I may be angry or something at that moment, but I don't know how I'm going to leave this conversation. And I don't want to feel that, so I either, if I'm not in control of the conversation, I feel out of control, and I'm scared of the feeling that I may walk away with. I might become more angry. I may end up crying. So just the being vulnerable and opening yourself up, and then not knowing where that's going to take you, and not being able to, and if I'm passionate about what we're arguing about, not being, the frustration of not being heard and not being able to get my voice across or my point across, so yeah, that's why I avoid conflict.
Yeah. And that is so true, Amina, because whether we admit it or not, and I think we're better off admitting it, conflict is something that causes pain in our lives. And sometimes we feel that dealing with it may cause more pain. And so allow me to share the following thoughts that everybody here on this call, like everyone in life, has a specific conflict resolution style. Whether you're aware of it or not, we all have our own conflict resolution style. So there are people who fight, we'll call it that. When it comes to conflict, they just want to get into it. They don't mind, the argument. They don't mind the debating. They just love that, okay? I don't think those people are necessarily more broken than the rest of us. That's just the way they are. They enjoy getting into an argument or a conflict. You have another type that avoids. It's the flight response. They don't want to deal with it. They would rather sweep it under the rug. So they'll do anything in their power to avoid getting into the conflict or dealing with the conflict. You have another type, which is the fright response, right? They're going to surrender, peace at all cost. And so for them to not be in conflict, they're going to give the other person whatever they want, right? And then you've got the diplomatic approach, what I call the let's cut the lemon in half and everyone gets half of the lemon, the 50-50 or the diplomatic approach. So most people I know have one of these 4 approaches to conflict. So just please humor me, just so we can know what the makeup of this group is. Anybody who's got the fight response to conflict, please raise your hand. So James, you raised your hand, but I think that's from before.
No, I just raised it now to ask a question because it just popped in my mind before you asked your previous question.
Okay, sure.
So is there any wrong style in that case? Because it sounds like with the approach, either way, it could still be beneficial. I'm just trying to figure out, is there a wrong technique in that case?
That's a very, very good question. In fact, we don't have time to get into it and all the details. What happens is that sometimes the response is appropriate in a particular setting, but it's not in a different setting.
Dependent on the situation is what you're saying, correct?
Well, it does depend on the situation, but you will find that most people, they have a predetermined setting of responding to conflict.
Okay.
And then they're going to adjust it based on the situation. Like for instance, let's say Christelle is someone who's got the fight response that's intrinsic to her. So in a situation with, I don't know, her boss or in a personal relationship, she may feel that she wants to react that way, but she's going to control herself and say, okay, this is probably not the best way to respond.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that would be more emotional awareness in that sense, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And that's where I wanted to go and saying, first of all, it's important that everyone knows what their natural response is. And the second thing is everyone needs to understand that conflict in itself is neutral. And to me, that's the biggest revelation in my coaching. As I do relationship coaching, I do organizational coaching, I do conflict management. And one of the biggest things I've learned is that conflict in itself is neutral. Conflict is not bad. The simple definition of conflict is 2 opposing ideas or perspectives. And so you're always in conflict every day. So conflict is not wrong in itself. In fact, conflict is a positive thing, because if you don't have conflict, that means you don't have diverging ideas, you don't have creativity. The opposite of conflict is uniformity. And you can't have a company like Google or Apple or General Electric that's growing with innovation unless people feel free to think and create and have different positions and opinions. So conflict in itself is not wrong. What usually is wrong is the way people deal with conflict, the way they manage the conflict. And that can either lead to constructive results or destructive results. I wanted to share a couple of tools with you guys, and then we can practice, or you can react and see how that helps or not. So the first tool I think that really helps in having and engaging in a difficult conversation is to clarify your intentions. To clarify your intentions. And the reason I think this is important is because people don't know your intention. Sometimes we assume that people know why we're saying something, but they really don't. And so when you engage in a difficult conversation, I find that it helps to clarify your intention from the onset of the conversation. For instance, to say, hey, Sean Pierre, sorry, can we talk about what happened yesterday, the way you reacted to my comment? The reason I want to talk about it is because I want to understand what triggered you at that moment.
And we're talking about that from yesterday. Why didn't you bring that up yesterday?
And again, this is realistic, right? That could be a fair question. I could say, you know what, Sean Pierre, I wanted more time to process it because I didn't want to react emotionally. And so I wanted to make sure that I process my emotions. And so I want to talk to you about it right now, if that's okay, so that I can understand where you were coming from.
Great. I like that there's some thought involved and you're using your intelligence. I think we're on a level where I'm willing to do that. I appreciate your opinion.
Awesome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jean-Pierre, for humoring me and playing along. This was perfect, right? He just jumped into the scenario because this could really happen, right? And I think, can you guys see how this approach has the potential to lower the person's defenses, right? What's another approach I could have used that could be less effective or less efficient? What's another approach? How could I start this conversation with Jean-Pierre in a way that would lead it in the wrong direction?
Well, you just pointed it out when you guys were having the conversation with each other. So say he said to you, why didn't you come to me right away? If you decide to deal with that, with those emotions right there and then, at that moment, you're just gearing off the way that you feel, and that could escalate the situation.
Exactly. Yes. Very good. Other comments about that? What other ways could I start? What are the wrong ways that I could have started this conversation?
I could
You
give you an
could have started it defensively.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that, Jessica.
sorry. I was going to give you an example.
Sure.
My example could be something like, so what was up with you yesterday? What was that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
You could,
exactly.
you
And we can use such language commonly, so commonly, that we don't perceive how charged this is. Because if I come across and I say, hey man, what was up with you yesterday? What was that about?
Yeah,
What's in
it's
that?
coming at it from a non-neutral stance. Like it's almost like blaming the other person and not
Totally.
taking responsibility
I'm
for
almost gonna want to be short as well. Like because he's kind of
Totally.
short and stern. And maybe
Totally.
I'll just give some sort of short response that I'm not putting a lot of thought into either.
Right.
So
Or or as a response, you could like as a response to that or something like it, you could be like, nothing, bro, nothing. Like I don't want to deal with this attitude right now.
Exactly.
Whoa.
Yeah.
basically starting as a starting the conversation in a defensive approach.
That's right.
Yes,
Absolutely.
it's very defensive. Yeah.
Yeah, great points, guys. And that's exactly it. If you start the conversation in a tone that is accusatory, then you trigger the person to be on the defensive. And so it's best to start the conversation as neutrally as possible, but also to reassure the person by clarifying your intentions. I want to talk about this, not to accuse you, not to shame you, not to blame you. I'm just trying to understand. And I need you to help me understand what the problem was. Okay, so that's the first tool. The second, any questions on that before we go on to the next tool?
I was gonna say with that, would you ask specifically to the way that they were feeling or the situation that caused them to feel that way?
That's a good question. I think I usually start with the facts and then because it's always easier to talk about facts than feelings. And so it's easier to start with that and say, hey, can you tell me what happened yesterday and what made you react the way you reacted? And eventually you lead into, well, hey, what were you feeling? What did that produce in you when I said this or when I said that?
So it's better to lead with the situation at hand and then build down from there kind of thing.
That's
I just
right.
wanted to get an idea. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, because most people, I think, are more comfortable talking about the facts, right? It's safer to talk about the facts than to talk about your feelings.
Understood. Thank
And
you.
sometimes people mix them too, right? But there's a difference between what happened and what you think happened, or how you feel about what happened. So the second tool, does anyone have any other questions before we move on? Okay, so the second tool is active listening. I know this is not new. You guys have heard this all the time. This is not new, but
Who says that all the time, guys? Who says that?
Is this the first time? Is this the
That's
first time?
something-
Active listening, attending.
That's something that I say all the time when I
There you
hear, when I
go.
hear someone that may misunderstand something. I'll
Yeah.
just pipe in and remind people, active listening, guys, active listening.
Guys, don't ask Katrina about my active listening skills, please.
Well, hopefully because of tonight, they'll get better, James. So Christelle, give us your definition of active listening. What is active listening to you?
Listening is not just sitting there and listening to the person, but actually hearing what they're saying.
Awesome.
You know what I mean? So if someone is coming to you and they're saying, this is really frustrating, da, 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 you're gonna look at that and depict out the emotion and take out the fact, and you're gonna actively listen to what the actual initial problem is. You're not gonna take out the white noise, and you're gonna listen to the actual content.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So I'd like to give you guys 4 components of active listening. And this actually helps me, and I try to practice this every day. So the first element of active listening is eye contact.
Mm-hmm.
The person is talking to you, you drop what you're doing, you put your phone to the side, you close the screen, your laptop screen, and you focus on the person. You communicate that you're important to me, what you have to say is important, I want to understand. So that's the first thing. You listen with your eyes, you establish eye contact. The second thing is that you listen with your ears. You fully are in the moment. You're not listening. You don't have your earbuds in. The radio is not blasting. You're not, watching a movie, but you're making sure that there are no distractions, that you can hear what the person is saying. And thirdly, you listen with your mind, meaning that you're opening yourself up to understand what the person is saying. It doesn't mean you agree with them, but you're trying to understand. You're not preparing a response in your head while they're talking, but you're trying to see it from their perspective. And then lastly, you listen with your heart. You open your heart to the person and you try to feel what they feel. Again, it doesn't mean that you agree with them. Doesn't mean you agree with them, but you're trying to feel what they feel. I was talking to somebody this afternoon, and they were explaining to me how difficult it is for them to be depressed because they suffer from depression. They have depression. I've never been depressed. I don't know what that is. But as they were talking, I felt their pain. I tried to put myself in their shoes, and I felt it. And that's what active listening is. It's not just listening with your ears. It's not just eye contact, but it's opening your mind so you can understand and opening your heart so you can empathize. Let me stop here and let you guys react to this piece of information.
That was
So remember, when you guys hear me say active listening in there, what Stanley just said tonight, okay?
Yeah, and it's all about that. It's all about, the verbalizations and reflecting the posture.
Right.
You want to be attending, and it's a lot nonverbal because about 7% of what you say is the message.
Right.
And everything else is the facial feedback hypothesis. You don't want to break that. It's like the relationship. It's almost like, you're an empathic person. You really don't want to break that. Like you said, the eye contact and eliminating distractions. You want to be observing the content. And these are basic counseling skills as well. These are great. Be genuine, be honest.
Absolutely.
I like how you did the connection with them, how, you got to shut everything down around you, eye contact, and how it all connects, and then ear, and then it goes to the heart, and then everything kind of follows. It sounds like something that kind of all sinks in one after another if you really pay attention to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we have time for one more tool tonight, and that is what we call mirroring. And this is something I practice every day. So after you've actively listened to the person, you repeat back to them what you heard them say in your own words, And what this does actually this is such a powerful tool. It communicates to the person that you get them, that you understand them. And immediately, and I've seen it work in my life for many years, it lowers the person's defenses. Because at the heart of it, everybody wants to be understood. And that's the problem. That's the problem in communication, because every person is trying to make the other person understand them. Whereas what's really needed is for them to be understood by you and for you to be understood by them. And so any questions? I'd like to do a demonstration, but before that, I want to give you guys a chance to ask questions or react to what I just shared. Christelle, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, and it just popped out of my head.
Sure, go ahead. I'm sorry I missed that. Go ahead.
She had something to share, but it popped out of her head, so that's why she's laughing.
Okay.
Like a popcorn kernel.
All right. Hopefully it'll come back.
I think it's awesome that
What I'm gonna say is, now I remember, it just popped back in. Is I feel like one of the most important things as humans is to be validated. So what you're saying with the active listening, like by doing that, you're validating that person.
Absolutely.
By using active listening skills, it gives them that validation without you actually saying to them, I understand, I feel you. It's actually more effective than actually saying, I understand and I feel you.
Yes, absolutely. And Christelle, and I'm asking the question to everyone, what do you think keeps people from validating others when they talk to them?
Understanding, not being able to understand or have that compassion or that empathy behind it.
Right.
Because a lot of people, they may not be able to put themselves in another person's shoes because their bias is too much at the forefront.
That's right. That's right.
Awesome.
And I
also,
think, sure.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry,
Go ahead,
sorry.
Jessica.
Okay, sorry. I was just gonna say, I also think that a lot of these skills are learned at a young age, like maybe in early childhood, just based on observation of our caregivers and how we were listened to as children. And because I noticed it in my daughter, she just turned 9 yesterday. And I noticed that her active listening skills are pretty on point. And sometimes I wonder, wow, like she's such a good listener. Like, how is that? But then like she mimics me, so I feel like she learns a lot of these skills from me and the people around her.
That's great. Yeah, that's awesome. I think also as we get older, sometimes we forget the importance of relationships and we focus more on being right and having our way. And my experience, what keeps people from active listening and mirroring, or validating, that's what we were talking about. It's because they feel that if I validate, it means that I agree with them. And the truth is, you don't have to agree with the person to validate the person. And it's always better to validate if you want to resolve the conflict. So I
was wondering, would that be more of a pride thing on either person's side in that sense then?
Yeah, you can call it that.
Not
Sure.
wanting to give in to the other person or something along those lines, sorry?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's definitely, you can say that, you can call it that. I think oftentimes there's also fear. Fear is such a strong motivator. You don't want to be taken advantage of. You don't want your needs to not be met. You don't want to make a sacrifice that's going to put you in an unfair situation. It's very complex.
There could be a fear of rejection also that plays
Fear of
into
rejection, absolutely. Fear of rejection. And so it takes vulnerability. So I only have time for quick modeling, for a quick example. So can I have a volunteer?
All right.
Okay, so Christelle is going to volunteer. And in fact, why don't we do that? We'll do 2 volunteers so that I can give you guys the chance to practice, and then I'll step out, but I'll tell you what we're going to do. So Christelle is a volunteer. Can I get another volunteer?
Okay,
All right,
I'll
James.
try.
All right, so James, here's what I want you guys to do, James and Christelle. So I want you to share for 1 minute. 1 minute. I want you to share about a person or an event in your life that shaped your life. But you have to be concise, okay? So just 1 minute, share about a person or an event that shaped your life. So let's start with James, for instance. So James, you're going to share that. If you were face-to-face or if you were in person, I would
Okay.
have you stand face-to-face with Crystal
Okay.
and just lock eyes, right? And this is one of the most powerful exercises I've ever done. So try to do this, exactly. Try to do what James is doing with the camera. So James, you're going to share about a person or an event that shaped your life. And then Christelle, you're going to actively listen with your eyes, your ears, your mind, and your heart. And then as soon as James is finished, you're going to, in 30 seconds, mirror back the essence of what James said in your own words, right? The facts and the feelings of what he shared. And then when you're done, you will say, James, did I understand you well? And then James, you get to say if she did it or not. And then we'll switch. Okay, that's all the time we have. So any questions on that? Okay, James, you ready?
Oh, my heart is pounding a million miles a minute. I'm as ready as I'm going to get, man.
That's good. That's good. All right, go. You have a minute.
All right. So what shaped my life? I would have to say watching my mom take care of us as my father was he was an alcoholic. He abused her and he still continued to push forward. She still continued to push forward no matter what. So that gave me the ambition to want to push forward, but it still didn't stop me from thinking in certain ways. But it did sculpt me to be the person that I am today. So for her, I have that to be thankful for.
Wow, James, that's an amazing accolade that you're giving your mom. It sounds like she was a pretty amazing woman, helping to shape you into the individual that you are. Having a parent, like you said, your dad being an alcoholic and abusive, I can't imagine how distressing that might have been. And it sounds to me like you're saying that your mom really kind of helped you through that process, as well as be able to still maintain and shape you into the solid individual you are today. Does that sound about right?
Oh, I want to open up more. Oh, this is getting intense. Yes, that was good. I liked it. Yeah, it did. Thank you.
The two of you. Awesome job. We'll debrief in a couple of minutes, but now let's switch the roles first. And then Christelle, you share this. You have 1 minute to share about a person or an event. And then James, you get to listen and actively and mirror. You ready, Christelle?
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I've had quite a few influences in my life, whether it be people or specific events. But the specific event that keeps coming into my head right now is the purpose of why I'm in this role. And that is because I suffered from abuse when I was a child. I had multiple sexual abusers. And for me, coming into this role, I want to be able to assist families and like the children, but also assist the families in knowing how to interact with their child after they've been abused. Because there's even in my experience, although my parents did their best to try and validate my fears and validate what happened and tried to ensure that I felt safe, some of the methods that were used made me feel abandoned. So I got into counseling for that purpose, so that I can maybe try and help parents steer through something as traumatic as this with their children.
I hear what you're saying, Crystal, and I want to first start off by saying thank you by sharing that. It was very, very brave of you to actually open up to me like that. I want to commend you for that. And I want to also take notice to the fact that you didn't use that as a weakness. You used that to push yourself forward, to push yourself through you used your trials and tribulations of your life to push yourself forward to where you are today. And it's just commendable to know that you want to reach out to the other children and families that may be suffering from the same thing, so you could help direct them the way that you felt you may have needed to be directed in life. So I want to thank you for the time that you took to speak with me, and I commend you very much. Thank you.
Awesome.
Very cool. Now, what you just did, obviously you didn't plan for it because you didn't know I was going to ask you to do that. But I want you to think about what it felt like, first of all, having to listen actively to the other person. How did it feel preparing your mind and your heart to receive what the person was going to share with you?
So it wasn't so much my mind, it was more my heart. It felt like my heart was pounding more than my brain was working, but because my brain connection in regards to my heart, I was focusing on that, and it just made me want to open up more to listen to her scenario.
Absolutely. Awesome. How about you, Christelle? When you were preparing to listen to James, how did that make you feel?
For me personally, I've always been the type of person to be that listener for people. So for me, it is a little bit more comfortable to sit back and listen to other people talk about their issues.
Right.
But I think that for me, the hardest part of that was actually thinking about what I was going to say to James just now. Like, it was more like I was more worried about what I was going, like which example I would use versus how I was going to approach James.
Okay.
If that makes sense to you?
No, totally. What I want you guys to see, it's hard work. Active listening is hard work. It does come more natural for some people like Christelle than others, but it's hard work. The more you train yourself, the easier it gets, but it's hard work. Now, how did it feel? Being listened to with such care and attention? How did you feel when you were the one pouring out your heart and you knew the other person was transfixed on your words and they were trying to understand you? How did that make you feel?
I felt engaged. I felt validated. He lifted me up. He made me feel good in a terrible situation. Like, he elevated my confidence.
Yes, beautiful. How about you, James?
So when it was happening, I was talking and I was paying attention to her cues, and I noticed that she was like nodding her head. She was there. I could tell that she was engaging with me on that sense. So it made me feel more comfortable to open. I didn't feel like she was just like, for instance, you'd say like, sitting there looking on her phone or paying attention to whatever else is going on in the room. I had that one-on-one connection with her, and that made me feel like I could open up more.
Amen. That's awesome. You know what it is though? That type of open-mindedness and opening your heart to the other person, that actually communicates love. It communicates respect and it communicates love. And I get a sense that you guys know each other already, but I've had the same exercise numerous times through workshops with perfect strangers, people that I didn't know before. And after doing this exercise for 5 minutes, and some people were in tears, I felt a connection and a bond with them that I couldn't explain. Perfect strangers. The simple fact that we sat down, we shared something that was deeply personal, knowing that we could trust the other person who was receiving, with that they were going to listen, that they were going to validate, and that they were going to show acceptance. So this is what I wanted to share with you guys. Unfortunately, I've got to run. I have an appointment at 9 that I have to get ready for. Thank you so much for having me, Angela. I didn't know this was going to be so much fun. You guys are all lovely people. It was a pleasure to meet
Thank
you all.
you.
And hopefully I'll pass
Yes.
this
Good
off
job,
again.
Stanley. Thank you
All
so
right.
much for
Thank
your
you, guys.
presence.
All the best.
Take care.
Thank you.